week, in the main room, the topics are behind the schedule. So I thought about waiting a little bit, and they're still coming. Oh, they're coming, people. So today I want to talk about Flink with MongoDB and how to enhance relevancy and personalization. The topic itself sounds like a lot of buzzword bingo stuff, but there's a lot of reality and reasoning behind it. So I'm Mark, I'm working for MongoDB. MongoDB is a database, obviously, so just a question, who doesn't know MongoDB? Right, so yeah. I'm working as a solutions architect. That means I'm traveling a lot, seeing a lot of prospects and customers. So I'm part of the pre-sales so-called organization. So I'm sitting in face-to-face meetings with up to CTO level, but usually in the architecture level, and also seeing a lot of code. In the past, I was a developer on my own. I worked in a small company as a consultant and did some hands-on coding. And since I joined MongoDB, I'm seeing the kind of the opposite side. And what I see there was the reason why I do this talk today, because there's a lot of buzz around personalization, relevancy. There's a lot of buzz about real-time analytics. I've seen the talk, like the Spark versus Flink talk a couple minutes ago, and this is there are a lot of rumors how to do that, and there are a lot of blog posts and technology things around it, and I just want to talk a little bit around it. So that's the reasoning behind this this session, and I want to start with a generic overview of the personalization process itself. So why is this relevant in Flink and the Flink aspect, but also what does it mean to developers and architects? And I want to talk a little bit about a life of an application. So what are the results and the findings of a life of an application when it comes to personalization, and also a little bit about architectural info with regards to separation of concerns, and just a short overview, Spark, Flink, and other data processing projects, and when it comes to clustering, how to do that with Flink. So when you look from the 5,000 feet of personalization process when it comes to e-commerce or retail, I mean, you can adopt this to also pharmaceutical things and also to IoT things, so personalization, understanding what the customer really wants or what the system really wants, where it heads to, and just offer a limited amount of offer instead of the whole catalog. So you have a user, the top level, and the user is creating a profile, or the device is creating a profile. You capture activity, so that's where streaming comes into place. So you have external data sources, where you get like public data, public information, like IP ranges, also weather information, all this stuff you store in databases, for example, in MongoDB. And then you do, most people do, or if they do batch processing. So they have worker scripts running, going through the data all the time, eating all the data, and then they have a result, and they pipe it back, hopefully, also to the central database. And this is kind of the old approach, or the typical approach, how you build applications. I mean, MongoDB is then new in this tier in that way, because it's not that old, but that's the reality of the past. And it gets interesting when it comes to batch analytics, because banks are using Python or any other language, and you now see R on Go, and then you have technologies like Hadoop and Spark. So you have a lot of things floating around, and specifically in batch analytics or in analytics itself, it's hard to find a way through that. And that has an impact to your application flow. So at the first step, I mentioned it, you create, or the system creates an object and creates some information, and this is usually also the way in the POC. So you start about having an idea, draw it on the board, and then you start coding in most cases. And when you start coding, you care less about style and you care less about the content. And the beauty of MongoDB is that it gives you a lot of flexibility of your data model. So you don't have to think about rows and columns anymore. You start thinking, you only think about your model, so your business model, or basically your object, what you want to store. And the first step, or in most cases, and this is reality, the document itself started small and gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the beauty of MongoDB is, as I said, you can store a lot of different things in it. So, and this object itself, it can grow, and it is allowed to grow until until 16 megabytes, which is a lot of text. But is that the right approach? And this is the question to basically the audience or to everyone. So is that the right approach? And the answer is probably not. It's nice for a POC, but you get confused. If you look into that and question yourself, so what is this object for? What is the purpose of this object? You see first name, last name, could be a profile. As you see zip code, okay, entered, that's fine. An age, does this change or not? You have interest groups. Is this like written in stone, or where is that coming from? You might have purchases. What's the date of the purchase? Do you want to update it all the time? So from the architectural view, is looking at this, is you have probably different uses of the same object right now. So you have profile data, you have customer data, you have session data, probably, and personalization data. And then you want to do some batch analytics on it. And trust me, I see that all the time. I see this starting small, getting bigger, having everything in one document, maybe separating into 2 or 3 collections or documents. But the better approach is, and this is like quite common, and when I went to university, that was the most common term, is service-oriented architecture, is you should start off thinking about services. So, and also you should start thinking about that when you start coding, when you do your POC. I mean, you shouldn't do everything at once, so premature, like you should not optimize before you really code things, but think about how you use your data and how do you want to deploy it and how you do want to manage it. So this is in most of my customers, when they took the first step of, let's say, service-oriented approach, they have probably a front-end system, maybe a cache, like a Varnish, which is fetching data as needed from backend systems, like profile services, customer service, some information about personas, so about like when you are interested in A, you might be interested in B, so you might probably fit into this category of a young, like a dinky or something like that, so double income, no kids, so you should like give them a very expensive, nice to have tech things. And this analytics stuff you still have, and maybe old ETL infrastructure underneath, you have this batch analytics layer underneath. Fine. So the benefits of that is, when you look at the code and you look at the objects you store in the database, the objects are smaller, or maybe they are also big, but they are very, very focused. You can also split your approaches and your iterations, so your development cycle. So one part of the application can be like improved faster than the other. The other might be a different team, maybe even in a different country. And another benefit is that you can use new languages. So when someone has a new idea about new features inside your code, you should start thinking about, is that really related to this object or this use case, or is this a new use case? So the reality is, lot of people are doing this already, but it's hard to guess when you have to split things. But that's normal and that's real life, right? The beauty is then you have less dependencies, and if you have dependencies, they are well defined. So my general advice for developers is like keep it simple and safe, or other would say keep it simple and stupid, a very American term. And you can read about that a lot in different books, and one I like a lot is like Clean Code Development by Robert C. Martin and others. How to write Java applications or even other applications or C# in a much nicer way, and it stays focused. And when it stays focused, your data underneath stays also focused, and you can manage it much, much easier. Great. So you have a good baseline, and what about the analytic stuff? So why we are here? Well, I showed that picture. So front-end delivery, great, thumbs up. Back-end delivery, BI guys, yeah. Here you have the database credentials. You can access to that, and you can work with it. But what if profile service thinks about a new way of storing data, maybe different meanings of attributes or something like that? Well, this is also not a great idea. So when you start using advanced data science stuff, or like basically just do batch analytics, you should start seeing a backend system also as a front-end system. It's different characteristics, of course, because it will access much more data in a shorter time or over time in a different way. So, but start thinking about this is a system which wants data from me, and it doesn't really care. It's not necessary to know is it a front-end system or a back-end system. It's a system for your service where you need to do content delivery. And this could be one thing, but it could be also multiple of these things. So a batch processing layer, a streaming layer, and you can consume it and put data into it. And you should look at it from the code like any other system which wants data from you. And this is important to know if you want to use advanced data processing stuff like Flink. So the advice for developers, the second one is, or the second page of it, is like you own your data. So if you have a service and you decide, I want to do it, I want to store different attributes, I want to store more information or less information, think about if you really need it, and if you need it, store it. That's it. No question if someone else is asking you, oh, by the way, what's with that data? You don't care because you define it in your dependency layer. Hopefully that this data won't run away. You have an API layer, and of course, if you ever said, okay, my service will deliver a first name, last name, you will not change this overnight, right? So you have to distribute that information to your other application developers. And second thing, say no. So a guy comes across and saying, hey, what about the credentials to the databases? You just changed it, and my ETL job is not running fine, or my PHP script is not really healthy anymore because it gets just a bunch of null values or whatever. Do not allow direct data access. Test it, and don't even use own data, like for on your own machine maybe, but if you work with data, test data. This is very important. You're not using PHP MyAdmin or something crazy thing. So really, like, if you want to work with it, if you want to migrate something, write a worker which is migrating your system, or make your system as hard as it can really read also stale or old data. So great. So we have the foundation for using more advanced technologies. So do we really need it? I mean, we are at the Flink Forward, so the result will be Flink is great, and it's really great, really. But I want to start small, or big like an elephant. Is like, and I'm active in a lot of different user groups, and also active at the Bitkom, so industry organization talking about big money and big things. It's very interesting to be a part of that. Old people are talking about old stuff. And when you ask them what is big data, the answer will be Hadoop is big data, right? So this is Hadoop. And when you ask them, well, what about Flink, or what about, I don't know, Flume, or whatever, they just look at you and say, what's that? So the baseline is Hadoop for me, and this is my answer to most of the people. It's like Hadoop is basically a distributed file system and a little bit more, and it gets complicated if you use it, but you have to look at it from the speed perspective. And the most important thing is the file system. It was mentioned in the talk just recently. It's about speed, and data processing and real-time processing is about speed. So when it comes to speed, when you go to Google and type in MapReduce or whatever speed, I'm almost sure that you will end up there. So you have Spark. Great. So it's a DAG execution engine, great. Data locality, very important, and in-memory in a way. So I reuse part of these slides in previous talks, and I will use it in future talks as well. And this is my, in a nutshell, view of Flink, which is important, so to give them the information that it is an Apache project. I mean, most of you already knew it, but it's nothing like brewed in a garage and no one else is using it. It's a real Apache project, and it can run on top of your existing infrastructure. And it's about, like, you can do batches, but everything is basically a stream. That's at least my understanding. And the most important thing for me is it supports iterative algorithms, and it has this cost-based optimizer. With that in mind, it's about like something in memory and looking to latency, and this is also about like the speed is what about then the database underneath, so where you should start using this technology layer, these stacks. Key value access, great, that's database. You don't need a processing engine for that. Range-based queries, also that's nothing important for processing. If you do some aggregation, then you might start thinking about processing power in Flink or Spark or Hadoop, but the reality is you can really do advanced stuff in SQL databases, but also in MongoDB. So you can do like maximum, minimum, something like that. That's easy, even with a lot of data. But then you can end up in this, I want to do more advanced stuff, and I will show you a really quick example of that in a minute. And then when you want to push it even further, you will end up in these clustering algorithms. And that's where Flink gets very, very interesting. Who of you ever implemented Kmeans? Just half of it. So this is like just a repeated thing of it. So I copied it, so because I will show it how it works with MongoDB. So you have Kmeans means you want to cluster your data in a way. So you want to know if, for example, if you want to suggest something to someone, so if it belongs to your group. So I told you before, like there's this concept of personas. So someone is who might be someone interested in very expensive, nice gadgets or not. And to get this information, you need a lot of data points, and you need to iterate over these data points and see if I'm now interested or not. And this is basically, you can do that with Kmeans. So you have a bunch of rectangles, this gray data, and you define data points, so centers, and then you do the calculations around it, so the nearest mean, and then you have the first iteration of your cluster. So this is picture number 2, and in picture number 3, you calculate inside your cluster what's the center of that in weight, and this is your new center. And then you do the steps again. So 2 and 3, you iterate over it, and this is hard in a way that you don't know when it's optimal. So you have to define how often you want to do that, and this is exactly what an iterative algorithm should do or must do. In in a process view of Flink, cut a little bit, and maybe with like there's a new UI maybe with 0.10, but you have data sources, and you have this process, and it will iterate over the process, and the result will be then piped into the third-party system. If you want to do that with Hadoop, it always cycles through disk. So means if you do that 10 times, you have 10 times the latency. Not great. If you do that with Spark, faster because it's in memory, but everything will be in the client, so the state will be saved there, and this will end up in interesting situations. Sometimes, so I've seen them, so out of memory things, so not great. And there are like nicer ways to do that. And for me, and I came across Flink about 1.5 years or 2 years ago, it supports these iterations, and you can even do fetch new data during these iterations. So how does it look in the code? So fingers crossed it will work. Or maybe that way. Yay. Okay. So I have two collections, so data sources, so centers and points, and these are just random numbers. So if you do db find points, I can't see it. I just search the points, so you have like a center ID and some data here. So 39x and y 36x1. So this is just a point in the array, and this is taken from an example also from the Flink side, so you can easily adopt that. If you need to if you want to do some calculations on it, you need to import that. So the most important thing is, of course, how do you convert information? How do you convert data from the database inside to the how do I get rid of the that way? So you have to define data sources in the code itself, and you have to define a way how to transfer this data. And this is right now, and similar to other things, this is where your work is a little bit, well, I wouldn't say hard, but it's also not easy. So you have data types, and this is the issue with Java itself. So MongoDB supports different data types. It's very handy if you use a non-type language. It's also great if you use a typed language, but data types are always different, a date format, for example. And this is where some of your thoughts have to go into. If you import and work with these data types, you need to define it. This is where these things are happening. So what we have in MongoDB is something called a BSON writable. So you write your data into a BSON object. BSON is actually the data format we work with the database, and you need to convert that. And that's not super. I mean, it's not super critical and not super hard, but you just have to understand it that you work with this. So right now, this is not done automatically. So right now we will have to use a Hadoop connector for that. But we are working on improvement that things are getting more fluent. So maybe you just even need to decide what like some annotations, and the rest is done automatically. So this code is published. It's on GitHub. The link is at the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to support like any questions on it. So you have this importer, this tuple, and where you map this data to Flink data, and in the end And here you have you are doing this map, so mapping it. And here are the definitions. So here, this is really super easy. You have just read from Mongo with the environment. I gave a presentation at the Code Talks in Hamburg how to do that. And then it works on it. It does this iterations, and then it's pumps this data into the final centroids, and then it pushes back to the database. So it's closing the whole process with it. And then writing it to Mongo, so just to the results sync. And the results sync was done here in results. And going back to the console, if it's still there, no it's not. So you have the centers and points, and if I'm running, it's on the screen, it's not really nice, but I have this job in NetBeans, and if you just run it, hopefully it will work. We start the processing for after a while. Let's see. It's complaining about something. Maybe if it will try to download something. But the result should be then in the result set. So it does it. So here you see the information where it fetched the data from the source. It will populate the information, will iterate over it, so you have a partial solution, and then it will moving it into the collection again, so it's piping it back. And the result, you can see here, so DB and centers. So these were the below section where the initial points, and then the result was piped to a different collection. And this is just a simple example how to use Flink with MongoDB. So it's really easy to, download Flink and just on your laptop. You will have a little bit trouble of the dependencies in the beginning. So when you're not really familiar with Java, but most of you are here because you might already use Flink. So just use it as a data source or a data sink. You can also use Kafka as a source and pipe it then to MongoDB. I'm actually in some POCs, and some of our bigger customers start thinking about that. And it's really interesting what goes on in the community, and I'm really interested to see results also from the community about new ways of using using Flink with a non-relational database like MongoDB. So the results looked well, not exact, looked like that. So the points were in the middle of these different colors, and you can then map them to the groups. So already talked about it. So I'm not sure if that's possible right now, but I'm pretty sure it might be. Like, Florian, do you think you can do that? Happy to see this code. Right, so mean shift clustering, some customers are thinking about that. What?
We can do anything.
Good, so yeah, mean shift clustering. I want to see that on GitHub. Will be interesting to see that. So the takeaways of this short talk is I personally see that seeing the evolution in data streaming and data processing projects is quite amazing, and it's with Flink, there's a new player there, and I see an increasing interest. Maybe also because there's a different streaming project kind of dying. So 2 years ago, there was this a different project, very popular, and I don't see much activity there right now or anymore. So Flink will provide some Storm support soon, I heard. But most important thing is it's exciting, but it's also not easy to understand in the beginning. So because of that, you should start thinking about in advance how to store your data, how to separate your data, how to separate your applications, so you can actually do this amazing things with your data. Starting is easy, extending of it could be challenging, and what it means with that is these projects are like, some of them are, Flink is quite mature, so I never saw it dying itself, but mapping it and so on, this might be challenging in the beginning, especially for those of you who are never worked with different databases or so. And if you search on forums or like Google groups and so on, it's hard to find some information about how to use it efficiently. So there's a MongoDB, I think there's a MongoDB blog post referring to Stratosphere, I think 2 years or 1.5 years old. I think that could be improved. So the community, and I'm kind of challenging the community, please publish as much like information to the web with the latest versions as soon as possible. So if you have an idea how to use it, don't think about like a blog post series about 10 blog posts, just keep it short and simple, like your code. And doing the first steps is easy, just aggregation with the database itself maybe, and then going ahead of that, going deeper into analytics and thinking about using Flink, or in the other way, if you already use Flink, don't stop with SQL, just also use other technologies like MongoDB and interacting with that, because the customers of ours, prospects, are already using it. Try it out, download it, of course. I have this simple example. I have to update it because it's 081, I think, but I mean, still okay. And if you have any questions, I think we have some time left. And of course, last thing I need to say is, like, I'm traveling a lot, so I need someone with me here in Europe. So I'm at MongoDB for 3 years now. We have quite a large team right now. What I'm doing, I think we have, like, in Europe itself, we crossed 100. We just crossed over the 100 people in Europe. But what I'm doing, we are a smaller team of 20 people, and we need more people, specifically German people. German-speaking consultants and solution architects. So if you're interested in a job, ping me. And any questions? So who?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to say that there is we published an example on how to use the MongoDB with Flink on our repository.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably they know the link, but
there's a sample of code like that does pretty much the I/O. It's read and write from collection at least.
Cool. That would be great. So right now we're working.
Yeah, we started from the old example, working with the 0.7.
Yeah, 0.7.
We updated to the 0.9, I think, 8, 9.
So the next step is 0.10, or maybe that's 1.0 in the future. Who knows? So that, yeah. So
yeah, probably. Yeah, there wasn't a big change between 0.8 and.
There are not that many changes.
Yeah.
So for me, working for MongoDB is and seeing, like, our support, but also the guys at Data Artisans, they are very, very helpful. So if you have any idea how to, or any problem you encounter, why is that in this direction or in that direction, can I use it differently, just ping them. They are really, if they have time, they are very, very helpful. So they helped me with that example. I had some crazy things.
I confirm that they are great supporting. And so another thing is that it will be great if it will be possible to read directly objects from,
I agree.
from Mongo, like with Spring Data, and don't use the
Hadoop
Bison writable.
So right now you have to use the Hadoop crouches, so that's could be improved. And we're actually working on a different approach, a more general approach for data streaming processes. or data streaming projects. And I am pushing us also to support it like Flink officially, or maybe working with the data artisans to make that at least more stable. So we have something called Mongo Connector, and I'm right now thinking about if we can use this thing called Mongo Connector to pipe in streaming data into Flink. So Mongo Connector is a different way of listening to MongoDB. So if you have a large MongoDB cluster, I have customers with over 200 charts, so just think about 200 portions of your, like, fragments of your data. A couple of terabytes or petabytes are stored there. And you have a system which is collecting the deltas of the information. And with this information, you might pipe into the streaming API and do some nice things with it. So this is what I'm thinking about right now. But it's not yet published. So hopefully I will get some demo code by the end of October. On the 20th, we have a conference in Munich talking about MongoDB, MongoDB days, and maybe I have a demo example there. So that's my goal. I'm not sure if I get it. So I have enough time.
So just a quick question.
Yeah.
Did you run the Flink on MongoDB on this big collection?
Sorry?
Or are you planning to run the a Flink job over this petabyte collection? I didn't understand that.
Yeah. In this example I just mentioned, no. So, but I know that these guys are really keen on getting their hands on larger data. So this was just a couple of bytes, kilobytes, but I really want to see a large deployment and working with it. So some of the guys presenting today are actually our customers, and I want to make some short connections to connect them to the people already using MongoDB, so maybe they can get their hands dirty with Flink and MongoDB, because most of the time these people are getting data from SQL servers, but they have also groups working on MongoDB, and why not connecting these points? So if you have, if you know your company is working with MongoDB already, just ping me, and we can connect the people. Yeah. So yeah, I will be around tomorrow as well, and of course this afternoon. So yeah, thanks for the questions. And if yeah.